There is a war in America. This is War in America. My name is Jonathan Warren, your host. Today is September 30th, 2025, Tuesday. Good afternoon, everyone. Got a lot to cover today. It's been a long day for me. The show must go on. We've got to keep finding. We've got to keep talking because this is looking ugly. There's been a lot of developments. I know the last few days have kind of been slow compared to the weeks prior. And, there was a point where the news cycle was overwhelming and there was too much information to keep up with almost. Now I feel like we're back to that. So I'm going to try to get through this quickly, try to be coherent and smooth as I can be. Let's get started. First, ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. Anti-Defamation League is an organization pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish. It seeks to essentially smear everyone who has any criticism of Israel or anything to do with American Jewish donors and AIPAC, led by a man named Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan Greenblatt shares a name with me, but we do not share, principles or values, that's for sure. A former Obama administration official, and frankly, seems like a terrible human. As Tucker Carlson is saying, the Anti-Defamation League is actually the opposite of what the name implies. They do seek to defame people and essentially intimidate people into, following their orders and their agenda, which in many cases is subversive and antithetical to American interests. So, for instance, they labeled Christian identity as a white supremacist hate group ideology. They promote Antifa and defend them, or at least defend Antifa, and say it's a non-violent anti-fascist organization, not a violent left-wing terrorist organization, which should raise a lot of red flags because we all saw the riots during the so-called Summer of Love at 2020, following the George Floyd death and some police shootings. They burnt down police stations. They burnt down, damaged several buildings in various cities. And frankly, they cannot be trusted. But however, they are coming under fire from many sides. It would appear that people are kind of getting fed up with that. I've seen people such as Congressman Luna and redheaded libertarian, people like that. Again, I said Tucker Carlson. They're all kind of railing against them. Even Elon Musk has joined the fight and calling for them to be investigated, calling for them to back off of whatever the hell they're doing when it comes to basically cracking down on First Amendment rights and free speech. They have submitted many requests to the Trump administration to crack down on these things. That's why a lot of these universities have had to comply with their version of anti-Semitism, which includes statements such as Christ is King and Hail Christ, which frankly is just horrible that they would think that they can get away with that. We're not going to put up with that, that's for sure. But meanwhile, you see all these universities following suit and complying with it. I saw that Northwestern University is now requiring students to take an anti-Semitism course before they can even register for classes. And many students are refusing to do so. You saw what happened at Harvard, where Harvard had to fire the president and really make a lot of promises and I think pay a lot of money. And then same with Columbia University. They had to kind of bend the knee and do what they said, or else their federal funding was getting cut off when it comes to the Trump administration. And then you see Marco Rubio is rescinded and rejected a lot of students. I think it was almost 1,000 at this point for speaking up against Israel and criticizing Israel, people who are foreign students, international students, and study abroad, as we call it, when I was in school. But the fact that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of State's office is being used in such a way to pacify the ADL, more or less, is disgusting. And it's well deserved criticism that they're receiving. It's, you know, past time this happened. So this is a positive development. This is a good thing. And we want to see that happen. So Brylan Hollyhand, I talked about him yesterday, I believe. He is an interesting figure, right? He was lab grown, it would appear, to replace the late and great Charlie Kirk. Initially, he presented himself as being sponsored by Turning Point, the organization that Charlie Kirk led. However, an official from Turning Point has denied this and said that Brylan Hollyhand is actually not affiliated whatsoever, except the fact that he's speaking at chapters of Turning Point. So he may be speaking at these chapters, but he's not being sponsored, he's not affiliated, and he's getting called out for that. Now, the crazy thing about this guy was he was in our feeds nonstop, and everyone was complaining about it. Why is this kid in our feeds? Why are we seeing him nonstop? Who is he? Who does he think he is? He's a staunch Zionist, of course, staunch defender of Israel and Israel's horrid actions. And frankly, no one was really looking forward to that development. Nobody was really like, oh, yay, we get this weirdo who's going to replace this guy who is, obviously an enigma and one of a kind in many ways, who spearheaded and led the biggest conservative outreach organization that there is, as far as I know, especially in college campuses. But Brylan has messed up. Now he's exposed. Allegedly, he's canceled his Q&A sessions at these chapters, and for good reason. He would get called out. Everybody's going to question him and call him a fraud. He doesn't want that. He's hopping on private jets. He wants to fly around. He wants to play celebrity. And I don't know who's sponsoring him. I don't know who's funding him, but apparently it's not Turning Point. So it's not a good look. Looks like he's taking advantage of Charlie Kirk's death to promote himself. Charlie Kirk went on his podcast when he had like 7 followers or 7 subscribers on YouTube or something like that. So the fact that he would do this after the fact to kind of promote himself is just, just another example of just disgusting behavior among the Zionists. So hopefully now that he's exposed and now that he's been ridiculed, he'll kind of fade into obscurity. I doubt it, just based on the way he was kind of being shoved down our throats. But he's definitely taking a hit here. He's definitely taking some damage when it comes to his reputation. And nobody really has a taste for him, it doesn't seem. And, this might ruin him if we're lucky. So Bad Bunny will be the performer at the next Super Bowl. A lot of people are upset about this. It looks like a political maneuver by the NFL, as Bad Bunny was outspoken about not wanting to perform in the United States in light of all the ICE deportations and crackdowns on illegal immigration. He's claimed that, he didn't want anything to do with the United States. He wouldn't perform here or whatever. Now, I've listened to a couple Bad Bunny songs, and, they're okay. I don't really, I'm not really big in Spanish music. I like Latin party music and pop music, but, or dance music, I should say. But when it comes to Bad Bunny, I could care less. I don't really care. However, it is interesting just because it seems like it's an intentional political message from the NFL to Trump. And frankly, un-American for that matter, because he's, Puerto Rican, I believe, but he's speaking bad against our country and really in favor of flooding our country with people who are not from here and defending that. So it seems to be political, but, I don't watch the NFL because I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm living in Dallas, and, no one's really watched it since the Black Lives Matter riots and the whole Kaepernick kneeling thing and everything, which I didn't really care about that one way or the other, but obviously it was just becoming political and cringe, and they've really watered it down in many ways. There's penalties every 5 seconds. Furthermore, Jerry Jones, right? We don't want to watch the Cowboys when Jerry Jones is leading them because it's just one disappointment after another. Dez caught it, for that matter. Dez caught that ball, and they said he didn't. And ever since then, I've just really not been interested in the Cowboys. Maybe when Jerry Jones is gone, maybe I'll regain an interest. But who cares? Like when I watch the Super Bowl, I watch the halftime show like half-heartedly, half-assed. Usually there's nothing else on at the time. That's really it. But having it on the background, whatever, I don't care. However, it does seem to be a political statement, which is interesting and maybe even a little troubling from the NFL itself. So, interesting development. The superintendent of the largest school system in Des Moines, Iowa of all places, is an illegal immigrant. Now, this guy fled. He was armed when he fled. I think they caught him and arrested him at this point. But it just speaks to how bad of shape our country is in, where the largest school system, the person who's in charge of educating our students and our children in Iowa, is not even a citizen here. And it really begs the question as to what these children were being taught. Were they being taught anti-American sentiments? Were they being taught to be, American-loving patriots? Who knows? It definitely raised a lot of questions and red flags there, to say the least. My question is, how did this guy get the job? You can't even get a job at McDonald's without having a Social Security card and ID. Did he fake the IDs? And that's really something I don't think anyone's talking about. How are these people getting into these positions of power? There was a police officer, I think in Maine, who wasn't even a citizen here. And they, sent him back where he was from, which, sending someone back to where they're from is not a cruel thing to do. Like, this is their home. This is our home. They came in. They were not supposed to be here. They have to go back. Fair enough. If you want to come back and wait in line, whatever, then cool. But at this point, they're hurting, the chances of people who do want to come here legally and do it the right way, because people are getting fed up with anyone coming in here and kind of, especially taking roles such as that, a superintendent, and then, see the H-1B1 or the HB1, I can't remember what it's called, visas, where, they're doing it for jobs from India or whatever, for tech jobs that really pay lower wages than American citizens are being paid. And Trump allegedly was going to crack down on that, right? But then he took it back and kind of watered it down. So that wasn't really serious. But we just really got to, keep in mind and remember that, the jobs that are here, the opportunities that are here, are supposed to be for the people who are from here and live here and fought for this country. And, both sets of my grandparents were veterans. My grandpa on my mom's side was a bomber pilot during World War II. And my other grandpa was artillery man for Korean War. And he oversaw, prisoner of war exchanges and things like that. But these people did not have this stake. They did not have this commitment to this country to fight and die for it the way that our ancestors have. So it certainly doesn't seem right for them to be using our hospitals, using our schools, using our roads, and taking our jobs. They took our jobs, you know what I mean? Like, that's a real thing. And we're seeing the superintendent, which is a very prestigious, very well-paid role, I'm sure, being taken by this guy who's clearly not, A, following the law, B, he's running off armed before they catch him. He shouldn't even be here, This is a shame. How did he even get that job? Who was corrupt enough to allow that? That's, a question that no one seems to be asking. Like, who else is complicit with this? Because they would need some kind of corruption and complicity to get away with these things and be even able to get those positions and roles in the first place. So hopefully, we don't see even worse situations than that, because that one's pretty bad. I mean, the superintendent of a major school system, I don't like that at all. I really think that that is a huge stain on, the shape of our country. I think it's a testament to the status and quality of what shape we're in. So that is highly concerning. Talked about this, several times, the Europe, Ukraine, Russia conflict. However, it does seem to be getting worse. And I watched Tim Dillon's show, which I've mentioned that already. But the way he talks about Ukraine, like, is spot on because, frankly, it seems like we're trying to get Ukraine nuked. We're trying to provoke Russia, as the book says behind me. It looks like we're trying to corner them and force them into using these weapons of mass destruction so we can justify maybe even using them on them, or using the nukes on Russia, or I don't know. It just seems like, or get the public opinion to do a full scale war, a hot war. NATO, Trump announced, is a big part of this because he ran on ending the war right away. He said it was Biden's war. He said he wouldn't give Ukraine any more weapons. He said enough was enough. Enough people have died. And now he's sitting here saying, oh, we're going to give NATO as many weapons as they want. Furthermore, we're going to allow long range strikes to Russia, which Biden didn't even do, I don't think. And what it sounds like is that these weapons are being operated from Germany, allegedly, by NATO officials. So that is more or less directly going to war with Russia at this point. NATO and Ukraine together are going to war with Russia, and it seems as though Russia is well aware. Their spokespeople and ambassadors are saying that. They're saying NATO is declaring war on us. So what comes next is the question. Are they going to be forced to the negotiating table? It's so bizarre that Putin was in Alaska a few months ago and him and Trump are like hugging and stuff, and then lo and behold, a few months later, we're sitting here threatening their entire country and their entire existence. And it's like, that was the whole argument Putin had in the first place for invading Ukraine. He's sitting here saying, oh, this is an existential threat to my country, so this is why I'm having to preemptively invade. And we, brush that off as a country. We were like, no, you're just trying to take Ukraine. Lo and behold, maybe he was right? I mean, I certainly do. I certainly think that he was absolutely correct, that we were really, engaging in brinkmanship, and it backfired. We were really pressuring them and pushing forward militarily and putting military weapons and NATO weapons on his border in Ukraine, and he can't stand for that. If he is a true defender of his people, a true defender of his country, he has to do something. And obviously, he did what he did, and here we are. But it's like we were so close to seemingly negotiating, and now Trump has completely betrayed that. He's completely gone back on that. He completely lied about that. And now it looks like, World War III might happen. He was the one telling Zelensky, you're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. Now who is? Obviously it's Trump. It's just like, I wish he would listen to himself sometimes. There's so many tweets you can pull up where he contradicts himself, where he sits here and says things that are, the opposite of what he's doing now. And it's just like, dude, you can't even like argue with yourself. You can't convince yourself because this is what you apparently thought. This is what you apparently said. So I've just become completely disillusioned with Trump. I've become completely disappointed and hopeless in terms of just, believing that he's going to do what he says. He went back on so many things at this point. And, this will come up again in the show, I'm sure, because there's a lot of things going on right now that are just insane and really moving the needle forward and really changing the course of history for that matter. So there was a letter from Charlie Kirk to Netanyahu. New York Post reported on it. Andrew Colvett confirmed on Tim Pool's podcast that it was an authentic document. Many people are skeptical. However, I don't think the letter looks good for Israel. People think it, is covering for him. I saw Nick Fuentes last night sitting here saying, oh, see, he says he is a die-hard supporter of Israel. He's trying to literally create a framework for them to, excuse this genocide, excuse this ethnic cleansing. But when you really look at what he's saying, he's questioning Netanyahu's judgment. He's questioning his geopolitical strategies, and he's questioning his public relations methods. He's really questioning if he's doing anything at all and calling him incompetent, calling him basically, a parasite, using the American spokespeople to do his dirty work for him. And Charlie Kirk, as Fuentes accurately pointed out, is doing the dirty work. He's having to go to battle with these people in public, these people who are spouting this nonsense on the news do not have to actually face the audience and, justify their positions. Whereas Charlie Kirk had an army of college kids around him sitting here saying, hey, why are we giving all our money to Israel? Why are we supporting ethnic cleansing? I thought you were a Christian. I thought you were pro-life. And Charlie Kirk was like, hey, man, I'm dying out here. I need some help. I need somebody to really give me some talking points. Talking point USA is what Fuentes calls it. And that seems kind of accurate. However, it does seem like he was getting fed up with Netanyahu's inadequacy in dealing with these accusations. It really seems like he was getting upset with taking the brunt of this criticism, and it was really hurting his organization and his reputation and his standing and his chances of running for office one day, probably. So clearly, Charlie Kirk was, giving some implications that he was not pleased with the course that was being taken, and he wanted, something different, which, if you ask me, was a direct challenge, a direct questioning of Netanyahu as a leader. And, it's not insane to say that maybe Netanyahu didn't take that very well. I don't think this disproves the Israel killed him theory. And I'm not sitting here saying that per se, but I am saying that it's still possible. It's still, a main suspect. They are still highly culpable, it would appear, and highly suspicious. It's like we should certainly be suspicious, especially with all the other things that are going on, and I'll touch on that later in the show, but we should definitely be suspicious of Israel, to say the least, because there's a lot of things that are happening right now that are very alarming. And the way that Netanyahu came out afterwards and was like, oh, we wouldn't kill Charlie Kirk. We had nothing to do with that. And then now they're taking over TikTok. Now they're coming for X. And, I'll talk about that here in a second, but it's very scary, very troubling. And I don't think the letter disproves any of that. I saw that YouTube paid Trump $24.5 million for banning him after January 6th. I don't really know what the merits of the case were, but Trump is on a winning spree, it would appear. I don't necessarily know if I like, the president going after media companies, but it seems like he has some valid reasons to. When it came to ABC calling him a rapist, when it came to 60 Minutes editing Kamala's interview to make her look better, all of those things look like valid reasons to sue. And I looked it up, and Teddy Roosevelt allegedly sued a newspaper for calling him corrupt, and he won. So it's not unprecedented, but you just don't want to see that on a large scale all the time. And especially when it comes to these companies that kind of need the federal government in order to do mergers, in order to keep their licenses, in order to expand and get government contracts, because Alphabet owns YouTube, Google, and Google has a lot of intelligence contracts, right? They work for the government in a lot of ways, so, and they've been known to, CIA and intelligence agencies. So it almost looks like a bribe, you know what I mean? It comes off that way. It certainly has been implied and directly accused by, Stephen Colbert, I heard say it once, that his own network bribed Trump essentially to complete a merger. But I mean, we don't want to see, these tech companies that are become so big, they're almost utilities at this point. They're almost to the point where they're not private companies anymore. They're just so universally used that I wouldn't say they're there yet, but they're almost there, to the point where they can't be politically active in that way. They can't be stifling free speech on that level. And especially, when there's so much political conflict and tension. It's like you can't do that, because it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to make people try even harder. I mean, that pushback is what Trump got reelected in the first place. So, I just find it interesting that he seems to be winning it. Nobody's even fighting it. And I don't know if it's a bribe or just a way to get him off their back and maybe even, remedy their reputation. But you keep seeing it. Seems like a hefty amount, 24.5 million, but I guess for them it's nothing. So I just thought that was an interesting development. Um, so American air tankers are headed to Europe. Last time this happened was during the Israel-Iran war in June, the 12-day war. So it looks like we're getting round two. I'm seeing reports from this everywhere. Iran round two. What does that mean? And what's the reason for it? Regime change? Are they going after the Ayatollah Khamenei this time? And the mullahs? I'm not sure. There was all this waffling about the IAEA and how they were going to allow inspections and reduce sanctions, but then the Europeans reneged on the deal and they were like, oh, we're not going to reduce sanctions, but we still want you to do the inspections. And it seems at this point it's like, at gunpoint that they're threatening them. Meanwhile, the Ayatollah's on Twitter sitting here saying, martyrdom is our reward. So he's really just readying his people for more death. I just don't understand. I don't understand our motive in this. I don't, maybe because Charlie Kirk's not around to talk out against it, even though he actually supported it afterwards. So when it came to the B-2 strikes, Operation Midnight, I think, Midnight something, I don't know. They have these silly names. These little, nerdy soldiers are coming up with these names, it seems like. But the B-2 bombers, hit all these so-called supposed nuclear sites in Iran. And now we have to do it again. What do we, I don't understand what the point is. I don't understand what the initiative is. I don't understand the reasoning for it. The only thing I understand is that Iran is running out of time and they've got to do it. I mean, not Iran, Israel's running out of time and they've got to do it before they lose American support. Because they know if they don't do it now, then they won't be able to do it later. Iran will eventually get a nuke. Just because science is going to move that quickly, everyone will have nukes, and that's really a scary thing. But they don't even really need the nukes. Israel's such a small country that their ballistic missiles alone and their arsenal of those could probably really take out a lot of Israel. So it's like maybe that's the whole issue, is they're just trying to prevent that from even possible, from any threat from being possible after the United States isn't shielding them anymore. That seems to be the only option, that makes sense. But I just really don't see the point of us getting involved. We don't have the money. We don't have the political clout at this point. We've used all our leverage in trade negotiations and tariff negotiations. Now we're just, essentially sacrificing our future and our reputation and our livelihoods, for that matter, for Israel once again. And I hate having to talk about Israel all the time. I would love, as Tucker Carlson has said, to never really have to talk about them. And I got accused of this today. I'm getting attacked left and right by just random anon accounts on the internet. But I don't care, whatever. That means I'm over the target. That means I'm saying the right things. It means I'm on the right track. And I don't really care. I would not want to talk about them. They accuse me of being obsessed with them. But it's not me, it's Congress, it's the US president, it's the entire world for that matter. The entire global community is up in arms about these and focused on this one area of the world, and everything seems to be connected to it. So that's why it keeps coming up in the conversation. That's why we have to keep talking about it. And furthermore, they really do influence us on a high level to where we don't even have a say in our own government, it appears. Nobody wanted war with Iran ever at any point during Trump's administration. That's what he ran on. That's what he said he wouldn't do, but now he's doing it. Or we're going to help Israel do it. Either way, it's the same thing. It's still costing us money. It might cost us lives. And, I really hate that. I really hate that it doesn't seem to be a situation where we can vote our way out of it. Like we can just vote for peace and actually get peace. It seems like the military industrial complex, it seems like the oil companies and all these special interests are going to get their war if they want, whether the American people want it or not. And, Israel obviously wants it. They wanted us to take down Libya. They wanted to take down Syria. They wanted to take down, Egypt at one point went down, and then you saw Iraq. And now, we're seeing Iran. And you got to question if Afghanistan was part of that. So why? Why are we doing this for them? Why aren't we taking care of ourselves? Nobody can afford healthcare. Nobody can afford medical care. Nobody can afford a house. Nobody can afford their student loans. There's homeless people everywhere. There's drugs everywhere. When it comes to drug overdoses, people are dying left and right. It's a sad state of affairs. Our roads are cracked. Our bridges are collapsing. You know what I mean? It's just the same old bullshit when it comes to overexpansions, overspending, and subversion by foreign interests and special interests for that matter. Oof. And I'll kind of elaborate on where I think this is going in here in a second. But I do want to talk about Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House yesterday. I don't know how many times he's been there at this point in the last few months, in the last year, 3 or 4 times. Each time seems to be more and more embarrassing when it comes to the way he humiliates our president and makes him look like his bitch, frankly. But they announced a peace plan proposal. Now, it's a 21-point plan. It involves same old demands, hostages. It's going to be hostage exchanges, demilitarization, de-arming, giving up your guns. And then supposedly there'll be this kind of council that oversees the rebuilding of Gaza. And the Gazans can allegedly stay or they can leave and then come back later. But it looks like a freaking trap because, as Netanyahu said as soon as the press conference with Trump was over, he said in Hebrew to the Israeli media that, Hamas is going to give up their weapons. We're going to get everything we want. Hostages are going to be released, and the IDF is going to stay in Gaza. Now, the plan calls for incremental reduction in military presence, but this is over a long period of time, and it just seems like a trap. If you were to ask me, I would say it's a trap. Don't fucking do it, because at this point you have the entire world support. You have Colombia and Pakistan talking about getting some army together to go in and physically stop Gaza, which, that could cause a world war if we step in between them and the IDF. But I just don't believe that this is a good idea. They, say they have some Arab countries behind them, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, even Pakistan for that matter, is on board with this at least. And, you have to wonder, is this the best option they're going to get? Because we just want the people to stop dying, don't we? I mean, if this stops the killing, then maybe it's a good thing, but I just don't believe and don't trust Netanyahu. They have broken almost every ceasefire they've ever made, ever. They bombed the negotiators in Qatar, one of the United States' ally. Netanyahu apparently had to call Qatar during the meeting yesterday at the White House and apologize for that and say, oh, I killed, one of your servicemen. I didn't mean to do that, which he doesn't give a fuck, So I just think it's a trap for Hamas or the Palestinians in Gaza. And but I don't know if they have another choice, and I don't know if there's a better option. It seems like this might be the best option they have at this point, just to at least not have to leave, at least not lose the land, and at least stop some of the killing. They also said they're going to get aid, which they've said they've not prevented any aid. But then I'm like, okay, well, how are you giving aid if they already have aid? So there's some contradictory statements there, right? Like they're sitting here saying, oh, we'll let aid in, but they've been sitting here saying for months that they've been letting a lot of aid in. So how would that be different? Have y'all not actually been letting aid in? Have you been letting in the bare minimum to keep these people alive so you just don't get accused of mass starvation, even though you are causing suffering and harm? It's nightmarish. And right now, Gaza City is being taken street by street. Hamas is saying that they've lost contact with some of these hostages. So it looks like Israel may have, killed more of their own hostages. They've already killed and bombed and actually shot several of their own hostages, which allegedly was the whole reason for all of this. Netanyahu doesn't give a shit about these hostages. He is more than willing to sacrifice them. During the actual October 7th attack, there was allegedly stand-down orders. IDF soldiers are reporting. There's a Hannibal Directive used, as some officials have said in the IDF and the Israeli government. Hannibal Directive is where they're shooting their own people to prevent hostages from being taken in the first place, shooting and firing upon vehicles, Hamas vehicles, in order to stop that. So it really just looks like a trap. It doesn't look like, this war is going to end. It looks like this is a justification and cover to give them more time and allow them to finish the job, because Trump says, if they don't accept this, then Netanyahu can do whatever the hell he wants. And what he wants is to further be protected by the United States and be able to blame Hamas for it. He wants to wipe these people off the coast of Israel. He wants them to be moved to Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan, and he wants them to go to Europe, for that matter. He wants Europe to take them in. And that's disgusting. I just don't think there's any actual intention for him to follow through with these proposals, even assuming Hamas does. So that's why I just feel like it's this trap. You're going to give up your weapons. They're going to claim that you're not following it, and then they're going to break it. And then they're going to just keep doing what they're doing. Now you don't have any weapons. So that's really the risk. And they're just not trustworthy people to negotiate with. They shot all the negotiators, you know what I mean? They blew them up and whatnot. So it's just like, how do you even make a deal with them? I was talking to Daniel McAdams last night, and he was just like, oh, it's a trap. This is a terrible idea. And I was like, yeah, you don't want to make a deal with the devil. And he's like, he is the devil. And I'm like, no doubt. I mean, I think Netanyahu is essentially evil incarnate. He's certainly a former military man. And you got to wonder how many people he's killed with his bare hands, how many children he's killed with his bare hands, and whether he even cares, whether he has a heart, whether he has a soul for that matter. It's just really dark looking at these images of these children and knowing that the person who's overseeing the other side doesn't feel anything about it, doesn't care anything about it, and he's willing to let his own people die, his own people suffer, and his own people take terrible hatred, and resentment around the world just from what he's doing in order to achieve his ends and achieve his goals. So I really just think that, I don't know, it's just not a trustworthy situation. And it's not a good situation, but I don't know if Hamas has another choice at this point. The war's been going on for, I think, almost 3 years, 2 or 3 years. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it's definitely 2 or 3 years. And it's just getting uglier and uglier. Every building in the whole strip is gone. So many people died, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. The estimates are all over the place. It's ugly. And I just really, every time I say this, I guess on this show, I kind of have to pause for a second because it's such a dark subject, such a brutal image, and there's just the cries of children ringing in my ears. There's the cries of innocence and the anger and hurt of children who are losing their parents, who are watching their parents being blown up, being burned to death, not being able to sleep at night because of bombs dropping on them and drones firing them. I saw this video of a drone shooting a doctor in the head, just randomly. It happened the other day. I'm just like, at what point is this enough? Everybody's kind of fed up with this. Everybody wants it to end. And it just seems like Trump is giving Netanyahu a cover to continue it and to basically blame Hamas if it doesn't go down the way that Trump presented the plan. I just can't believe he's still trusting them. And you got to wonder what they have on him, because it just really doesn't speak to common sense as to why he would do these kind of things unless they have something on him, right? And we know that Mossad rules by deception, as they say, and that they operate off the tactics of assassination, bribery, and blackmail. And it's just an ugly, ugly situation. And then you see in the TikTok takeover, but not just TikTok, they said that they're going to target X next. And X is, I will say, very critical of Israel, but rightfully so. But I have seen an uptick in Ziobots, I call them, faceless, profile, pictureless people, or so-called people, who are just really spewing the Hasbara talking points, the propaganda that Israel finances. And I'm just like, where are you people coming from? Like, are you even real people? And I'll argue with them, I'll entertain it, but it's just like, they're not listening. They don't listen. They don't actually address your points. And who are they? It's really hard to respect somebody who shows up to an argument without, with a mask on, essentially, and a fake name. I'm just like, you don't even back up your own opinions with your face and your name. Why should I take you seriously? But especially when, they don't even address the points you make. I was talking to this one guy today just about, how AIPAC and the AZC became AIPAC, and how Kennedy was trying to get them to register as a foreign agent. And he's like, no, it was the Justice Department. And he's like, no, it wasn't AIPAC. It was a different organization. And I'm like, but yeah, it became AIPAC. And then, yeah, it wasn't Kennedy per se, but it was his administration. He's the head of his administration. So obviously he's the one ordering them to do it. He's the one who wanted them to do it. And then next thing you know, lo and behold, he's shot dead and up the street from me. You know what I mean? 10 minutes away, 10-minute drive from me. I can go where Kennedy was killed. And you just got to wonder, like, was that connected? It certainly appears so. Certainly, a lot of people think so. A lot of people think that Angleton was involved, and he was certainly honored when he died in Israel. You know, he was given some kind of huge state funeral, more or less, and memorial, and said, you know, he's one of the greatest friends Israel has ever had. So those kind of things are really, really sketchy. And I know that they're losing this public info war, so I guess that they've just decided, hey, we have to go all out. Trump is, you know, providing them some cover to kind of give them more time, kick the can down the road, but the war is not ending. You know, it's just not, and it really doesn't look like it's going to end until every building, you know, every single building is destroyed. Not only that, until every person's out of Gaza, like until they completely force everyone out. And it's like at that point it might end, but at what, you know, at what cost? At the cost of millions of refugees, millions of children growing up without parents, so orphans, you know, people without limbs, and they're all going to be angry. They're all going to be resentful, and this is just going to create more, you know, terrorism and more insurgency and more rebellion and resistance. So I just don't think this is a good idea. I don't think it's a good solution. But I will say that Grok itself is unreliable. You know, X is seemingly bending the knee and starting to comply with the Ziobots and the Hasbara. So that is what is the most concerning to me, is that, you know, Musk seems to be complicit in this and seems to be going along with this. You know, a lot of this is tied to Epstein. A lot of this is tied to Charlie Kirk assassination when it comes to this being a thread that could unravel an entire cloth of lies and deception and corruption. And I really fear for what's coming in the near future, because we know at the rate of advancement and technological progress that AI will be here soon, true AI, which means it'll be smarter than everybody, more capable than everybody, and it can teach itself whatever it needs to. Technology can be solved in a matter of years, thousands of years worth of human progress done in a couple of days. You know, those kind of things are coming into the realm of possibility, into reality. Not only that, we're seeing the humanoid robots, the Optimus, and other companies that are really about to unleash these products, so-called, on the public that are going to replace all of our jobs. It's going to completely eliminate the need for human labor at all. And we're looking from some people saying, some of these experts are sitting here saying, as soon as 5 to 10 years, you know? And that might be, you know, I guess, I don't know. You know what I mean? It might be a bad estimate, but it might be a good estimate. It's hard to say. However, it's coming eventually. And you got to wonder, what would that look like and what happens next? Well, we have a financial situation where we're 38 trillion in debt. And so what I've started becoming concerned about, and you know, I was watching Tim Dillon, it's kind of popped in my head, and he's kind of saying these same things. Like, we can't afford all these things. We're seeing all these cool technology come out, yet it doesn't seem like it's for the public per se, because we can't afford anything. Our wages are, you know, stagnating, inflation is shooting up, and everything's getting more expensive and more difficult to live. So what, you know, what could happen, what will happen? And when you're seeing, you know, Larry Ellison, you're seeing Mark Zuckerberg, you're seeing Elon Musk, you're seeing Bezos, Jeff Bezos, all kind of together all the time, Peter Thiel, Palantir, you know, all that stuff happening at the same time, this is kind of the theory that's being fermented, is that there'll be a financial collapse or a massive terrorist attack of some kind to bring about some form of martial law. Okay, so no constitution, no rights, and then we're going to see like a communist, technocratic, corporate oligarchy of some kind. So it'll be a situation where nobody owns anything, yet there's an abundance of everything. You don't have to work, you can do whatever you want, except unless, and you better not, talk ill about the leadership or try to change that or disrupt the system in any way, because it seems like it'll treat you like a bug in the matrix, or a virus, and come after you. So that is really my biggest fear at this point, is that we're basically putting ourselves in some form of human jail, with an open air prison, for instance, where you can do whatever you want except for free speech, except for protests, except for organizing political movements, because they'll be at a level of technological advancement where they can wipe everybody out with the push of a button. These robots, these AI, these whatever, it'll be really difficult at that point to push back. And so I think we really need to be concerned and be hesitant to really just roll into the future without, kind of making some demands like, hey, we're going to be able to work. You're not going to take all of our jobs. There's going to be options for people to, politically organize, and the leadership should not be a permanent structure. It should not be a case where people are, individuals are more powerful than countries just because of they have an army of robots around them and trillions of dollars. It just doesn't seem like that is the fair, equitable, and smart way for society to progress. It doesn't seem like that's the best way to go forward. It doesn't seem like that's, what's ideal. It doesn't seem like that's what anybody wants. But it seems like that's what's coming. And that's a huge shame. And I don't think I wrote this down, but Venezuela is on the list, right? We talked about Iran and how it looks like we're about to go to war with Iran. Obviously, we put a bunch of warships around the Iranian, or not the Iranian, the Venezuelan coast, and we've been shooting little dinghy boats, with supposed drugs on them and migrants, according to Rand Paul, which, what the fuck? Why are we using $1 million bombs on these little boats? That's so crazy to me. But it seems like we were trying to provoke and instigate and set the tone for a actual invasion of Venezuela. I've seen reports that this is happening. I've seen reports that Trump has decided that we will invade Venezuela, and it's under the pretense and context of going after drug cartels, which doesn't make any sense at all, because everyone knows the CIA has been in bed with these organizations and cartels for decades, since the 80s at least. And so I'm like, are we going against our own agencies now? But it's about the oil, it's about the gold, and it's about the fact that Venezuela is aligned with Russia, China, and Iran, and they've spoken ill against Israel. It seems like that's really the threat of Venezuela or whatever. But I saw that he's considering airstrikes. I've seen that he's going to invade. So this is the new report, and this is the guy who said no new wars. Over and over again, no new wars, no new wars. But I'm just like, does he even have a say in this? Does he even get to decide? I don't know. And for that matter, there's so much misinformation, disinformation. I hate using those words because they use it, during COVID or whatever, to basically say things that were not true. But we're getting contradictory facts about the same aspects of simple and easily verifiable details. Things, especially, relating to the Charlie Kirk assassination, for instance. When you ask Grok, sometimes it says that Charlie Kirk's still alive. So if you ask it about a vest, it'll give you mixed information. I'm sitting here arguing with people online that, Erica Kirk supposedly said he refused a vest, but then later the New York Times edited the article to say he demurred it, which I'm not even sure how to pronounce that word, but which means like a less kind of, I guess, aggressive way to say no. He was like more reluctant than refusing. And then I don't know. It's just this article in the New York Times with Erica Kirkinson here saying, "Oh, he's just going to trust his security team, and I wanted him to, but he didn't." But then, like, people online are sitting here saying, "Oh no, these people say he wasn't wearing a vest." I heard that Megyn Kelly said he was wearing a vest and hypothesized that a bullet bounced off and ricocheted off his vest into his neck. But I think this was like right after when people were just trying to figure out what the hell even happened. And now it seems like the biggest, conspiracy or internet theory is that his lapel and his microphone, which I have on one around right now, so hopefully this thing doesn't blow up. But apparently it blew up on it. That's what they're sitting here saying now. This is the internet sleuth conspiracy theory that's kind of dominating, as far as I could tell. But even that is just like you can't verify anything, and no one seems to even be really trying to on the inside, except for Candace Owens, for that matter, and she's being ridiculed and smeared left and right. No one is believing what she says, even though I believe what she says. Even though I just think she's just trying to get to she's just throwing things out there sometimes, and she admits it. But she's just trying to get to the truth. This is her friend, and she watched him get murdered in front of the entire world. So clearly, she's not going to sit here and just let it go when it looks like all this narrative and all this stories that they're saying about Tyler Robinson and trans furry and all this shit wasn't even true in the first place. Like, she's sitting here saying that his family's in witness protection. They didn't really turn him in. They just didn't want a SWAT team to come in and shoot him. All these things that they're saying to us really doesn't seem to be verifiable. But, she seems to be the only one who has an inside source in the matter and trying to get information on it. The autopsy is another weird thing. Like, they haven't really commented on that or confirmed or denied an autopsy, yet I'm hearing, people like on Alex Jones making comments about, oh, the public autopsy report says this, but when you look into it, I can't find a public autopsy report. It doesn't even say whether there was one or not. So we're just getting a lot of different information. I really think they're flooding the zone, and I will say that again, with just contradictory facts to throw us off. And I say they by the intelligence agencies, the government, and the people who are in on it, whether that's the tech companies or whether that's the people even closest to him, which you really got to wonder, like, was, was his own friends behind his murder? Was he Julius Caesar, more or less? Like, that's just so dark and hard to grasp that level of evil. But it's certainly possible at this point in time. I saw a report that Turning Point USA actually booked the State Farm Arena that they did his funeral at all the way back in May, and that there was nothing else on the schedule at that time. So it's like, was this planned all the way back then? I don't know if that's true or not. Don't quote me on that one, because I haven't looked into that myself. I just saw a report literally right before I came on here. But it's just like stuff like that. And it's like, if that's not true, then why are we hearing stuff like that? I've never really seen a situation like this where no one can agree on the basic facts, and it seems like this is intentional. It seems like there's an intentional, conspiracy or whatever to basically make it where nobody knows what's real and nobody knows what to trust. And Elon Musk is talking about building this alternative, I guess, database that's supposed to counter Wikipedia. But it's like, I can't even get Grok. He says it's Grokpedia, what he's going to call it. I can't get Grok to tell me that Charlie Kirk's alive half the time. And then furthermore, I can get it to admit it lies blatantly, and we'll sit here and say, oh, yes, I've been programmed to be confident and to not show any uncertainty, even when I'm wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, that's called lying. If you're sitting here pretending to be confident about something, you actually don't know if that's the answer or not, and it turns out to not be true, that is blatantly lying. And it'll be like, yeah, you're right, I lied. And I'm just like, oh, shit. Well, I shouldn't trust you at all. I think we really have to verify everything on a level, and sometimes it's not even possible because, oh man, like some of these press conferences, some of these people's names that are being brought up, when it comes to Tyler Robinson, and he was supposedly like given a scholarship by this guy who used to be part of the CIA. Well, the guy's name is wiped off the internet, wiped off the Utah Valley University website. Not only that, every staff member is now off of it apparently. And then, you try to go to these old press conferences, and there's just not any video of these press conferences of this major historical event, this national tragedy. You can't find them anywhere. I'm just really getting concerned with that level of, and that extent to which things look like they're being hidden and intentionally erased from the internet. It's like you wouldn't even know that would be possible, but you know that now that they have these quantum large language models and algorithmic AIs, that maybe they can really just scrub the internet and put what they want. And this is straight out of 1984. The books, they were rewriting the books in 1984. That's the guy's job. He would go through all these old history books, find things that weren't supposed to be in there, take them out, replace them. It seems like this is what's happening to the internet. It seems like the internet's being completely controlled, completely erased, completely, I guess, engineered to create a certain reality. And I'm just like, bro, that's the Matrix. That is literally the plot of the Matrix. So, when Andrew Tate, these people reference the Matrix, it's like, okay, this seems like it's real. This seems like this is actually happening. And it's terrifying. And I've started really, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I've been getting some threats. I've been getting some accounts on X that have tens of thousands of followers who are really going after me, calling me names and attacking me personally, attacking my appearance and attacking the way I talk, or attacking, I don't know, just obsession with Israel and things like that. But, Marjorie Taylor Greene had to sit here and say, I'm not suicidal. And I feel like I have to say that too at this point. So for the record, guys, I'm not suicidal. I would never kill myself. So if something happens to me, you know that it had something to do with this. And, it sounds paranoid. It sounds crazy, but it's just like, before you really have a big name, that's when they would be able to get away with it, right? If you're a nobody, then it would be nothing just to get rid of you. And especially if they thought you were on the right track and onto something and about to be bigger than you are now. So I'm getting kind of paranoid here. I think I'm over the target when it comes to what's happening, and I just really am starting to get concerned for my safety, not for necessarily myself, but for my daughter and for my family, for my friends. But I just really, I saw this Stonewall Jackson quote that was essentially like, look, we don't fear death as Christians because only God decides when we die. So, when it comes to that, it's just a matter of being ready, being ready for it, because we know it's going to happen, but we're not going to change our principles. We're not going to yield. We're not going to cower, and we're not going to stop. And I really just, I say that and I mean it, because there's so much at stake. There's so much beauty, so much good. When you talk to people in the real world, you see that. But online, it's a different story. Online, it's looking ugly out there, and it's getting scary. It's just getting scary. But we just have to have faith, and we have to stand together. And remember, we're on the right side. We're on the side of Christ. And as the Christians preach, the war is already won. We just have to go through the battle. We have to do the battle, but the war has already been won. It's already guaranteed, and it's already, when Christ died, it was won right there. So we just have to go through these motions and keep the faith, and really just trust and believe that everything will be okay in the end. And the end is death, and everyone dies. So can't fear death. So you just got to face it. I'm not going to stop. This guy was sitting here saying, he's really accusing me of being paid by Iran. And that to me is so funny. He's like, oh, Breitbart is sitting here reporting that 300,000 people are working for Iran on the internet, and you're one of them, is what he's sitting here saying. And I'm like, look, I would love to be paid for this. I mean, I'm not going to change what I say, but if someone wants to pay me for saying it, that would be awesome. But nobody's paying me. And, I would do it anyways. And I'm clearly doing it anyways. And the reason I'm doing it for is because I love my country. I love my home. I love my family. I love my friends. I love, my life here in America. I love the land that we fought for. I love our rights and our freedoms and our Constitution and our liberties. And frankly, if we don't keep fighting for them, then they will go away. Because there is a war in America, and this is War in America. My name is Jonathan Warren, reminding you to live free and keep fighting. Thank you.